The dust never settled in Salvation Ridge. It hung in the air like judgment, coating everything: the wooden storefronts, the hitching posts, the faces of people who'd learned long ago that survival meant keeping your head down and your business to yourself. The town sprawled across the high desert plateau like a scar on the land, all raw timber and false promises, the kind of place where people came to disappear and ended up trapped instead. Caleb Rourke hadn't slept in 3 days. He stumbled through the main street just after dawn, his boots dragging through the dirt, his arms cradling a bundle wrapped in what used to be his wife's best shawl. The fabric was stained now, sweat, milk that wouldn't come, tears that had dried hours ago. Inside the bundle, his daughter made sounds that weren't quite cries anymore, just soft, desperate whispers of breath that were getting farther apart. "Please," he called out, his voice cracked and raw. "Somebody, anybody." The few people already out in the street turned their backs, literally turned, like he was carrying plague instead of a dying baby. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store, actually stepped inside and shut the door. He heard the lock click. Caleb had been a proud man once. 6 feet of lean muscle, strong jaw, steady hands that could break a horse or build a barn. But grief had hollowed him out. His wife Sarah had died 4 days ago, bled out bringing their daughter into a world that didn't want either of them. The midwife had done what she could, but frontier medicine was more prayer than practice. Sarah's last words had been about the baby. "Keep her warm," she'd whispered. "Find someone to feed her." He'd tried. Every woman in town, every door. They all had reasons. "I don't have enough for my own." My husband wouldn't allow it. "It's not proper, Mr. Rourke, you understand." What they meant was, your wife died in scandal, bringing a child into this world without enough time to make it decent. Doesn't matter that you married her, doesn't matter that you loved her. This town has standards. Standards. The word tasted like poison. "God damn it," Caleb shouted into the empty street. "She's 3 days old. She's done nothing wrong." A curtain twitched in a window above the saloon, then dropped back into place. The baby made a sound that wasn't quite human anymore, more like a kitten drowning. Caleb looked down at her tiny face, Sarah's eyes, his stubborn chin, and felt something break inside his chest that would never heal right. He sank to his knees in the middle of the street. "Please," he whispered to no one, to everyone, to the dust and the morning sun and whatever God had decided this was fair. "I can't lose her too. Get up." The voice came from behind him, low and rough like it wasn't used much. Female, but not soft. Not kind exactly, but not cruel either. Just present, like she'd materialized from the shadows themselves. Caleb twisted around, still on his knees, and saw her for the first time. Eliza Boone looked like the desert had tried to erase her. Mid-30s maybe, though hard living could add years or subtract them. Her dress was clean but worn to threads in places, brown fabric that matched the dust so well she almost disappeared against the buildings behind her. Dark hair pulled back tight, not a wisp out of place. Face that might have been pretty once, before whatever happened to put that particular emptiness in her eyes. He knew who she was. Everyone did. The woman who'd lost her husband to a mining accident, then her son to fever, then her reputation to whispers about what kind of woman loses everyone around her. Bad luck, some said. Curse, others muttered. Either way, Salvation Ridge had decided she was contaminated, and they'd made sure she knew it. "I said get up," Eliza repeated. "You're making a spectacle." "They won't help," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "No one will." "I know. That's why you need to get up and come with me before someone decides to make this worse than it already is." She didn't offer him a hand, just stood there, waiting, while the baby's breathing went quiet again for 3 seconds, 4, 5, then gasped back to life. Caleb stumbled to his feet. You can help?" Eliza's expression didn't change. "I can try. No promises. Your daughter's already half gone." The bluntness should have hurt, but Caleb was too exhausted for offense. He followed her down the street, past the judging windows and locked doors, toward the edge of town where the buildings thinned out and gave way to scrub brush and stones. Her place wasn't much. A lean-to structure built against an outcropping of rock, one room with a tin roof that probably leaked when it rained. But it was clean, obsessively clean. Everything in its place, swept corners, a narrow bed with blankets tucked tight enough to bounce a coin. "Put her on the table," Eliza said, already moving toward a basin of water. Unwrap her. Caleb's hands shook as he peeled back the shawl. His daughter looked even smaller on the rough wooden surface, her skin that terrible gray color that meant organs were shutting down. Her chest barely moved. Eliza washed her hands with the same methodical precision she seemed to apply to everything. Then she stood over the baby, just looking for a long moment. Her face revealed nothing. She needs milk, Eliza finally said. She needs it now, or she needs a grave. Those are the only two options left. I know, Caleb choked out. I've tried. Everyone in town. I'm not everyone in town. The words hung in the air between them. Heavy with meaning, Caleb was too desperate to unpack. Eliza turned away, unlacing the front of her dress with quick, practiced movements that suggested she'd thought about this long before he'd shown up at her door. This might not work, she said, her back to him. It's been years since my son. She didn't finish the sentence, just gathered the baby up, positioned her with the kind of confidence that came from muscle memory, and waited. Caleb stood frozen, watching his daughter's mouth search, find, latch, watching Eliza's jaw set hard like she was bracing for impact, watching the seconds tick by with nothing. Then something changed in Eliza's face. A flinch, a catch in her breath. Relief or pain, Caleb couldn't tell. Probably both. The baby made a sound, not a cry, a satisfied grunt. Her tiny fist uncurled against Eliza's skin. Is it? Caleb started. Quiet, Eliza cut him off. Don't break her concentration. They stood there in the dim light of the lean-to, two strangers and a dying baby that might not be dying anymore, while outside the town continued its morning routine like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Caleb could feel it, the way you feel a storm coming hours before the first cloud appears. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the baby's suckling slowed, then stopped. She fell asleep still attached, her face finally showing something other than desperation. Eliza gently detached her and handed her back to Caleb. She'll need more in a few hours. And again after that. Every few hours for... She stopped, seemed to recalculate her entire life in the span of a breath, for as long as it takes. Thank you, Caleb said. And the words weren't big enough, weren't anything close to what he felt. I don't know how to... What do you need? Money? I have the ranch, I can pay... I don't want your money. Then what? Eliza was already relacing her dress, her movements stiff now, like she'd remembered who she was and what this town thought of her. You need to leave, now, before someone sees you here and decides to make assumptions. I don't care what they think. You should. Her voice went flat. You have no idea what they're capable of when they decide you've crossed a line. But Caleb was already seeing it, the pieces clicking together. You lost someone. Your boy. Eliza's hands stopped moving. For just a second, her whole body went rigid. Then she resumed lacing with the same mechanical precision. That was a long time ago. Different situation. You need to go. Eliza, Mrs. Boone, she corrected sharply. And yes, you need to leave. Take your daughter. Come back in 3 hours. Use the back way through the canyon. Don't let anyone see you. Caleb wanted to argue, but his daughter was breathing steady now, her color already better. He couldn't risk whatever fragile thing had just happened here. 3 hours. Back way. I'll be here. He was at the door when Eliza spoke again, softer this time. Your wife, Sarah. I saw her around town a few times. She always smiled at me. Most people don't. Caleb turned back. Eliza was standing by the window now, looking out at the town that had rejected both of them. Her profile could have been carved from the same stone as the cliff behind her house. She was kind, Caleb said, even when people weren't kind back. Then she deserved better than this place. Eliza's reflection in the dusty glass showed nothing. So does your daughter. You remember that when things get complicated? What do you mean, when things... But Eliza had already turned away, signaling the conversation was over. Caleb left the way he'd come, slipping through the scrub brush and rocks, keeping his daughter close to his chest. She slept the whole way, the first real sleep she'd had since being born into a world that didn't want her. The ranch was 7 miles northeast of town, carved into a valley where the desert gave way to grassland. Caleb's father had built it 30 years ago, before the town had a name, when the frontier was still wild enough that a man could claim land just by being stubborn enough to hold it. 300 acres, a dozen head of cattle, a house that was more sturdy than pretty. It had been enough once. Now it felt like a tomb. Sarah's grave was on the hill overlooking the eastern pasture, marked with a cross Caleb had built from fence posts. He'd buried her wrapped in her wedding dress, the nice one she'd been saving for something special. Never got the chance to wear it while she was alive. He stood at the grave for a long moment, holding their daughter, trying to find words that didn't exist. "I found help," he finally said. "Not from any of the people we knew, from someone they threw away, same as they're trying to throw us away. But she's keeping our girl alive, Sarah. That's more than anyone else would do." The wind picked up, carrying dust devils across the valley. Caleb had never been a man who believed in signs, but he chose to take it as agreement. The house was exactly how Sarah had left it, half prepared for a baby that arrived too soon. A cradle Caleb had built from pine, lined with blankets she'd sewn during her pregnancy. A drawer full of tiny clothes she'd made from scraps and hope. Everything waiting for a child everyone assumed would die. Caleb laid his daughter in the cradle and stood watching her sleep. This tiny human who'd managed to survive 3 days of rejection and deprivation through sheer stubborn will. Sarah's will. His will. Maybe her own will too, already formed and fierce. "Need a name," he muttered to himself. Sarah had wanted to wait until birth to decide, convinced they'd know the right one when they saw her face. But Sarah hadn't lived long enough to see much of anything. He tried out a few, testing how they felt in his mouth. Anna, Catherine, Rose. All fine names, all wrong somehow. Then he remembered Sarah reading to him from that old book she'd brought from back east, stories about brave women doing impossible things. One name had stuck with him, though he couldn't remember the character, just the name itself, strong and clear. "Lila," he said to the sleeping baby. "That work for you?" Lila shifted in her sleep, made a small sound that wasn't quite agreement but wasn't protest either. "Good enough." 3 hours later, Caleb rode back to town the long way, through the canyon like Eliza had instructed. It added an extra hour to the trip, but he understood why she'd insisted. The canyon approach brought him in behind her lean-to, hidden from view of the main street. Eliza was waiting when he arrived, standing in the doorway like she'd been tracking his approach. "You're late." "Canyon route's longer than I thought." Caleb dismounted, Lila starting to fuss in his arms. "She's hungry again." "I can hear that." Eliza stepped back to let him in, and the routine began again. The washing of hands, the clinical positioning, the waiting to see if her body would respond a second time. It did. Faster now, like something had remembered how. "Named her Lila," Caleb said, just to fill the silence. Eliza didn't look up from the baby. "That's good. Better than something flowery that doesn't fit who she'll become." "You think you know who she'll become?" "I think she's a fighter. You can see it in how she latches. Desperate things give up. Fighters hold on until they find what they need." A pause. "She's a fighter like her mother, probably." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "Sarah would have liked you." "No, she wouldn't." Eliza's voice was matter-of-fact. She would have been polite because that's who she was, but she wouldn't have understood someone like me. People like Sarah don't understand people like us until it's too late. People like us? The ones who get left behind when things go wrong. Your wife died, so now you're tainted. My family died, so I'm cursed. Different circumstances, same result. We're the ones they can safely ignore because acknowledging us means acknowledging that bad things happen to good people, and that terrifies them more than anything. Caleb had never heard anyone put it into words before, but the truth of it hit like a fist to the gut. So what do? We survive. Eliza shifted Lila to her other side with practiced ease. We don't give them the satisfaction of watching us fail, and we definitely don't expect them to change their minds about us, because they won't. That's a pretty bleak way to see the world. That's a realistic way to see this town. Eliza looked up at him for the first time since he'd arrived, and her eyes were hard as flint. You need to understand something, Caleb Rourke. I'm doing this because a baby is dying and I can help. That's all. Don't mistake it for friendship or charity or anything else. When Lila doesn't need me anymore, we go back to being strangers. That's how this works. And if I don't want it to work that way, then you're a fool. But something flickered across her face when she said it, not quite regret, but close. You don't want to be associated with me more than necessary. It'll only make things worse. Caleb was about to argue when they heard it, voices outside getting closer. Male voices, multiple men, moving with purpose. Eliza's whole body went rigid. Back door. Now. But now. Caleb grabbed Lila. She'd finished eating anyway, falling back into that satisfied sleep, and moved toward the back of the lean-to. Eliza was already blocking the front entrance when the voices arrived. Mrs. Boone! Sheriff Tom Pritchard's voice carried the kind of false politeness that law enforcement used when they'd already made up their minds. Got a minute? Sheriff? Eliza's tone gave nothing away. Something wrong? That's what we're trying to figure out. Pritchard was in his 50s, thick around the middle, the kind of man who wore his badge like it proved something. Been hearing stories about Caleb Rourke coming around here multiple times today. Caleb pressed himself against the wall by the back door, holding his breath, holding Lila close. Through the gap in the walls, he could see 3 men with the sheriff. Tucker Willis, who owned the livery, John Brennan from the hardware store, and Marcus Steele, the banker who ran half the businesses in town and most of the opinions. Can't say I've noticed, Eliza said. I tend to mind my own business. See, that's interesting, Marcus cut in, his voice smooth as snake oil. Because Tucker here saw Rourke's horse behind your place not an hour ago, and Mrs. Henderson at the general store swears she saw him heading this direction this morning, carrying that baby of his. A lot of people move through town, Mr. Steele. I don't keep track of all of them. Eliza, Pritchard tried for sympathetic and landed somewhere near condescending. We're just concerned is all. Rourke's in a bad way. Everyone knows it. His wife dead, baby starving. Man in that state might do something desperate, might impose on someone who's too kind-hearted to say no. I'm not known for being kind-hearted, Sheriff. You know that better than anyone. The barb landed. Pritchard had been the one to investigate her husband's death, then her son's death, asking questions that implied she'd somehow caused both. He'd never found evidence, but he'd never needed to. The questions themselves had been enough to poison the town against her. All the same, Marcus pressed, if Rourke has been bothering you, we need to know, for your protection. How thoughtful. Eliza's voice could have frosted glass. The same town that crosses the street to avoid me suddenly worried about my protection. What changed? Nothing changed, Tucker spoke up, clearly uncomfortable. We just don't want... if Rourke's trying to get you to nurse his baby or something, that's not right. That's not proper. There it was. The real concern. Not Eliza's well-being or even Lila's. Just the town's precious sense of propriety. Offended by the idea that a widowed man and a cursed woman might be in the same room together. I see. Eliza's tone went flat. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your concern for my virtue, such as it is, but I haven't seen Caleb Rourke today, and even if I had, what business would it be of yours? It's the town's business when one of our own is mixed up in something that reflects poorly on all of us, Marcus said. Rourke needs to accept that his daughter's fate is in higher hands now. Prolonging her suffering with desperate measures isn't Christian. It's cruel. Caleb felt rage boil up from his gut, hot and violent. His daughter wasn't suffering anymore. She was sleeping peacefully in his arms, her belly full, her breathing steady. And these men, these sanctimonious bastards who'd turned their backs when she was dying, now wanted to decide her fate based on their comfort level. He was halfway to stepping out and confronting them when he felt Eliza's intention through the wall, sharp as a knife. Don't. Not yet. Not like this. I'll keep that in mind, Mr. Steele, Eliza was saying. Will that be all? For now, Pritchard said. But Eliza, Mrs. Boone, you remember what we talked about after your boy died, about how sometimes the Lord has plans we don't understand, and trying to fight against them only brings more pain. I remember, Sheriff, you were very clear about the Lord's plans for my life. The words carried weight that made even Pritchard shift uncomfortably. Anything else? The men left, their footsteps fading back toward town, their voices dropping to whispers Caleb couldn't make out. He stayed frozen against the wall until Eliza appeared in the doorway. They're gone, but they'll be watching now. Caleb moved back into the main room, his heart still hammering. Let them watch. They can't stop me from... Yes, they can. Eliza cut him off. You're not thinking, Caleb. You're a single man, bringing your infant daughter to a widowed woman's home in secret. In this town, that's enough for them to take her away. Say you're unfit. Say I'm corrupting you. Say whatever they need to say to feel righteous about it. They wouldn't. They absolutely would. Eliza's face was stone. I've seen this town destroy people for less. They'll wrap it in concern and Christian charity and do-gooding, but at the end of it, Lila ends up in some family that deserves her more than you do. Some proper family. Some people they approve of. The truth of it was suffocating. Caleb looked down at his daughter, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the forces gathering against her survival. So what do we do? He asked quietly. Eliza was silent for a long time, staring at nothing, her mind clearly working through scenarios and consequences. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a resignation that felt like defeat. You can't keep coming here. It's too visible, and now they're looking for it. Which means... She trailed off, the implications hanging heavy in the air. Which means what? Caleb pressed. Eliza looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time he saw past the armor she wore. Saw the loneliness, the exhaustion, the quiet desperation of a woman who'd been alone so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be needed. Which means if we're going to keep Lila alive, I can't do it from here. She said it like she was pronouncing sentence on herself. You have that ranch 7 miles out, isolated, private. Room for... She stopped, swallowed hard. Room for someone to stay if they needed to. Caleb's heart started pounding for a different reason. You're saying you'd come to the ranch, stay there, help with Lila. I'm saying it's the only option that keeps her alive and keeps the town from interfering. Eliza's jaw set. I'm saying I pack what little I have. I ride out with you tonight. And I don't come back until Lila doesn't need me anymore. Months, probably. Maybe longer. Eliza, I'm also saying this will destroy what's left of my reputation. They'll assume the worst. Hell, they've already assumed it. This just confirms their suspicions. She met his eyes. But a baby gets to live. So that's the trade. Caleb felt something crack open in his chest. This woman, who owed him nothing, who'd already lost everything this town could take from her, was willing to sacrifice what little she had left for his daughter. I can't ask you to do that, he said. You're not asking, I'm offering. Eliza turned away, already starting to gather her few possessions. Besides, there's nothing left for me here. They took it all years ago. At least this way someone benefits from my particular skill set. It's not just skill, Caleb said quietly. It's kindness. No matter what you say about not being kind-hearted. Eliza's hand stilled on the blanket she was folding. Don't make this more than it is, Caleb Rourke. I'm helping because I can and because no one else will. That's all. But Caleb was starting to suspect it was more than that. Starting to see that Eliza Boone, for all her walls and warnings, was someone who'd been waiting for a reason to matter again, and his daughter had given her one. 2 hours later, as full dark settled over Salvation Ridge, 2 horses moved quietly through the canyon heading northeast. Caleb rode in front, Lila bundled against his chest. Eliza followed on a borrowed mare, her entire life packed into 2 saddlebags. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like commitment or promise, or things neither of them could afford to believe in yet. But as they crested the ridge and the lights of the town disappeared behind them, Caleb felt something shift. Not hope, exactly. Hope was too fragile for what they were doing. This was more like determination, like the understanding that sometimes survival looks like 2 broken people making an impossible choice because the alternative is unthinkable. The ranch house appeared in the moonlight, dark and silent. Caleb had left it only hours ago, but it felt like stepping into a different life, one where his daughter had a chance, one where he wasn't alone in fighting for her. He dismounted and helped Eliza down, still holding Lila close. Guest rooms to the left of the main bedroom. It's not much, but it's clean. Sarah kept it ready for... He stopped. For visitors that never came, for the family they'd hoped to have. It'll be fine, Eliza said, taking her bags. I've lived in worse. She disappeared into the house without ceremony, leaving Caleb standing in the yard with his daughter. Lila was stirring, starting to fuss, hungry again. Inside, he found Eliza already unpacking with the same methodical efficiency she applied to everything. She looked up when he entered with Lila, saw the baby's distress, and simply nodded toward the rocking chair Sarah had insisted they buy. "Bring her here." And so the routine began again. Feed, sleep, wake, feed. Every few hours, around the clock, this fragile dance of survival. Caleb tried to help where he could, changing Lila, walking her when she was fussy, keeping the house running while Eliza focused on keeping his daughter alive. They barely spoke those first few days, just functional exchanges. "She needs changing." More water by the bed. "I'm going to check the cattle." But slowly, inevitably, the silence began to feel less like avoidance and more like understanding. They developed rhythms. Caleb learned to anticipate when Lila would wake, having warm water ready for Eliza. Eliza learned the sounds of the ranch, stopped flinching when the cattle lowed or the wind rattled the shutters. On the fourth morning, Caleb woke to find Eliza in the kitchen, making coffee. She'd found Sarah's apron hanging on a peg and put it on without thinking, and the sight of it hit Caleb like a kick to the chest. "Sorry," Eliza said, catching his expression. "I should have asked." "No," Caleb managed. "It's fine. Sarah would want it used." They drank coffee in silence. While Lila slept in the cradle, Caleb had moved into the main room. The baby looked better every day. Color in her cheeks, strength in her cries. That particular baby pudginess starting to fill out her tiny frame. "She's going to make it," Eliza said quietly, more to herself than to Caleb. "Thanks to you." Thanks to stubbornness. But Eliza almost smiled when she said it. "Hers and mine both." "And mine," Caleb added. "Yes, and yours." Eliza looked at him over the rim of her cup. "What made you keep trying? After the first 10 people said no, why didn't you just accept it?" Caleb considered the question. Sarah's last words. "Keep her warm. Find someone to feed her." Wasn't a request. Was an order. And I've never been good at disobeying orders from women I love. Loved. Present tense, though she was gone. Eliza noticed. "You still love her." "Always will." Caleb stared into his coffee like it held answers. "But she's gone. And Lila's here. And I have to figure out how to be enough for her on my own." "You're not on your own," Eliza said, then seemed to catch herself. "Right now, I mean. For now." "Right. For now." But they both knew something had shifted. The temporary arrangement was starting to feel less temporary. The stranger in Sarah's apron was starting to feel less strange. A week became 2. 2 became a month. Lila grew stronger, started smiling, started reaching for things. Eliza's milk came in fully, steady and reliable, and the desperate edge wore off the feedings. They settled into something almost normal, if you could call 2 people hiding from society with a baby normal. Caleb started riding into town once a week for supplies, always on guard, always expecting confrontation. Sometimes he'd see Sheriff Pritchard watching him. Sometimes Marcus Steele would be in the general store, making pointed comments about Christian duty and moral failing, but they left him alone, mostly. As long as he kept whatever was happening at his ranch private, he never mentioned Eliza, never confirmed or denied, just bought his flour and coffee and bullets, paid cash, and rode back to the ranch where a woman who wasn't his wife was raising a daughter who was. It couldn't last. Caleb knew that. Eliza knew that. Something would break eventually. The break came on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after Eliza had moved to the ranch. Caleb was fixing fence on the north pasture when he saw the riders coming. 5 of them, moving fast, kicking up dust. He recognized Pritchard's horse in front, recognized Marcus Steele's expensive saddle. The other 3 were local ranchers, men Caleb had shared meals with, worked alongside, considered friends once upon a time. He rode to meet them halfway, positioning himself between the approaching men and the ranch house where Eliza was inside with Lila. Every instinct screamed danger. "Caleb," Pritchard called out, pulling up his horse. "Need to have a word." "About what?" "About the situation at your ranch." Marcus moved his horse forward, clearly the real authority here despite the sheriff's badge. "We've been patient, Caleb, given you time to grieve, to get your head straight. But this has gone on long enough." "What's gone on long enough?" "Don't play stupid." John Brennan spoke up, his face red. Whole town knows you've got Eliza Boone living here, alone with you, nursing your baby, acting like she's your wife when your real wife's barely cold in the ground." The accusation hung in the air like gun smoke. Caleb's hand drifted toward the rifle on his saddle. "What happens at my ranch is my business." "That's where you're wrong," Marcus said smoothly. "You're part of this community, whether you like it or not. And when you bring shame on this community, it becomes our business." "Shame?" Caleb's voice went deadly quiet. "My daughter was dying. Every single person in that town turned their backs. Eliza Boone was the only one willing to help. And you're calling that shame?" "We're calling it improper," Pritchard interjected. "An unmarried woman living with an unmarried man, nursing his child. Caleb, you have to see how this looks." "I see exactly how it looks," Caleb shot back. "It looks like I'm keeping my daughter alive. That's all I care about." "Well, you should care about more than that." Marcus's voice hardened. "Because we filed a petition with Judge Morrison, requesting a hearing to determine Lila's fitness for your care." Caleb's blood went cold. "You're trying to take my daughter." "We're trying to ensure she's raised in a proper Christian home," Marcus corrected, "with a proper Christian family, not in some arrangement of sin out here in the middle of nowhere." The other ranchers shifted uncomfortably, but none of them spoke up. They'd chosen their side. "Judge Morrison's agreed to hear the case," Pritchard added, almost apologetically. 2 weeks from today, in town. You'll need to appear. Bring the baby. We'll need to verify her condition. And if I don't, then the judge rules in our favor by default, and we come take her." Marcus smiled, thin and cruel. "Your choice, Caleb. Play by the rules or lose everything." They rode off before Caleb could respond, leaving him sitting on his horse in the middle of his own land, feeling the walls close in. He rode back to the ranch in a daze, found Eliza on the porch, Lila in her arms, watching the dust from the riders settling back into the earth. "I heard," she said simply. "They can't," Caleb started, then stopped. Because they could. They absolutely could. Eliza looked down at Lila, who was grabbing at her fingers, completely unaware of the forces aligned against her. "They're going to use me. Make me the proof that you're unfit, that you've chosen immorality over propriety." "I chose my daughter's life over their approval," Caleb said fiercely. "I'd make the same choice 1,000 times." "I know." Eliza's voice was soft. "But knowing you're right doesn't win in a courtroom, especially not in this town." Caleb sank onto the porch steps, his head in his hands. "What do we do?" Eliza was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a decision that would change everything. "We fight, but we fight smart." She shifted Lila to her shoulder. "They want to make our arrangement the problem? Then we take away their ammunition." "How?" Eliza looked at him, her eyes clear and hard and absolutely certain. "We get married." The words hung between them like smoke from a gun barrel. Impossible to take back. Impossible to ignore. Caleb stared at Eliza, trying to process what she'd just said. Marriage. The solution was so simple it felt like a trap. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." Eliza stood up, still holding Lila, and walked to the porch railing. Her back was to him, rigid as iron. "Think about it. Every argument they have falls apart if we're married. Unmarried woman living with unmarried man. Gone. Improper arrangement. Gone. They lose their entire case." "Eliza, marriage isn't... It's not something you just do to win an argument." She turned around, and her face was harder than he'd ever seen it. "Isn't it? Half the marriages in that town are business arrangements, land deals, family alliances. At least ours would be honest about what it is." "And what is it?" "Survival." She said it like the word itself was a weapon. "You need someone to keep Lila alive. I need..." She stopped, seemed to reconsider. "I need a roof that doesn't leak and a town that stops treating me like I'm contagious. That's the deal. Clean. Simple." Caleb got to his feet, his mind racing. "There's nothing clean or simple about this. We barely know each other. We know enough. I know you'd die for that baby. You know I'm capable of keeping her alive. That's more than most married couples can say on their wedding day. But Sarah is dead." Eliza's voice cut through his protest like a blade. "I'm sorry, Caleb, but she is. And standing here mourning her won't keep Lila safe, won't stop them from taking her in 2 weeks. The bluntness should have felt cruel, but it didn't. It felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to him since Sarah died. Everyone else had offered sympathy and prayers and meaningless platitudes. Eliza just gave him the truth, sharp-edged and unavoidable. "You really think this would work?" he asked quietly. "I think it's the only thing that might." Eliza adjusted Lila, who was starting to drift off to sleep. They can't argue with a married couple raising their own child, not without exposing that their real problem isn't morality, it's control. Caleb looked at his daughter, peaceful in Eliza's arms, and felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. Marriage meant standing in front of the same people who'd condemned them and claiming something neither of them believed in. Marriage meant tying his life to a woman he'd known for 6 weeks. Marriage meant Lila lived. Everything else was just noise. "Okay," he said, "let's do it." Eliza's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Relief, maybe. Or regret. Hard to tell. "We'll need a witness. Someone who won't run straight to Pritchard and Marcus." "Oh, there's no one in this town we can trust." "Then we go somewhere else." Eliza started pacing, her mind clearly working through logistics. "Next town over is Millbrook, 40 miles east. They have a judge. We ride out tomorrow, get it done, ride back, present them with a done deal before the hearing." "And then what? They're not going to just accept this." "No," Eliza agreed. "They'll fight it. But we'll have the law on our side. Makes it harder for them to take Lila without looking like the villains they are." Caleb ran his hands through his hair, trying to think of another option. Any other option. But his mind came up empty. This is insane. Most worthwhile things are. Eliza headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I don't expect anything from you beyond what we already have. Separate rooms, separate lives, mostly. Just together enough to keep them off our backs." "Eliza, get some sleep, Caleb. We leave at dawn." She disappeared inside before he could respond, leaving him alone on the porch with his thoughts and the desert wind and the growing certainty that he was about to make either the best or worst decision of his life. Sleep didn't come easy. Caleb lay in his bed, Sarah's bed, their bed, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about what morning would bring. In the next room, he could hear Lila fussing, then Eliza's low voice soothing her. The sounds of a household that almost felt normal if you didn't look too close at the cracks. He must have dozed eventually, because next thing he knew, gray light was seeping through the window and Eliza was knocking on his door. "Time to go." Caleb dressed quickly, pulled on his cleanest shirt, the one Sarah had made him promise to save for important occasions. Figured this qualified. When he came out, Eliza was waiting by the horses, Lila bundled against her chest in a sling she'd fashioned from a shawl. "She'll sleep most of the way if we keep moving," Eliza said. "I fed her before sunrise." They rode in silence as the sun climbed, turning the desert from gray to gold to that brutal white heat that made everything shimmer. Caleb kept glancing at Eliza, trying to reconcile what they were about to do with the stranger she still mostly was. He knew surface things, how she took her coffee, how she hummed sometimes when she thought no one was listening, how her hands never stopped moving unless she was holding Lila. But the deeper things? The things you should probably know about someone before marrying them? Those remained locked behind walls he suspected she'd spent years building. "Can I ask you something?" he said, breaking the silence around mid-morning. "Depends on the question. Your husband. How'd he die?" Eliza's jaw tightened, but she answered. "Mind collapse. He was working a claim up in the hills with 3 other men. Support beam gave way. They got 2 of them out alive. Thomas wasn't one of them." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was 5 years ago. Different life." She adjusted Lila, who was making small sounds in her sleep. "He was a good man. Not particularly smart, not particularly ambitious. But good, kind. The kind of person who'd give you his last dollar if you needed it more." "Sounds like Sarah." "Yeah." Eliza glanced at him. "Probably why they both ended up dead. Good people don't survive places like Salvation Ridge, not intact anyway." "Then what does that make us?" Eliza almost smiled. "The people who stopped trying to be good. We just try to survive now. Morality's a luxury we can't afford." Caleb wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. Maybe she was right. Maybe Sarah's kindness had been a luxury this frontier couldn't support. Maybe the only way to make it out here was to get hard and sharp and stop caring what people thought. Millbrook appeared on the horizon around noon, smaller than Salvation Ridge, dustier if that was possible, but it had the essential infrastructure of civilization: a courthouse, a general store, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse. Everything a town needed to pretend it wasn't just humans clinging to rocks in the middle of nowhere. They found Judge Canton in his office behind the courthouse, a rail-thin man with spectacles and the permanently exhausted look of someone who'd seen too much human foolishness to be surprised by anything. "Help you folks?" he asked, barely looking up from his paperwork. "Need a marriage license," Caleb said, "and someone to perform the ceremony." That got Canton's attention. He looked up, studied them, dusty from travel, the woman holding a baby that clearly wasn't more than a couple months old, both of them carrying the particular tension of people making decisions they weren't entirely sure about. "You folks running from something?" "Toward something," Eliza corrected. "Does it matter?" Canton considered this. "Suppose it doesn't. You both of age. Yes? Neither of you already married?" "Widowed," they said simultaneously. "Baby yours?" he asked Caleb. "Yes." Canton looked at Eliza, seemed to make some calculation, then shrugged. "Not my business. License is $2. Ceremony's another $1 if you want me to do it. Need 2 witnesses. Can grab some folks from the street if you don't have any. $3 to change your entire life. Seemed too cheap somehow. But Caleb paid it, and Canton produced a form that required their names, ages, previous marriages. The bureaucracy of binding 2 lives together, reduced to boxes on a page. "You got rings?" Canton asked. Caleb hadn't thought that far. Eliza shook her head. "Can use these." Canton pulled 2 plain iron bands from a drawer. "Left here by a couple that changed their minds halfway through. Figured they'd come in useful eventually." The witnesses turned out to be a shopkeeper and his wife, dragged in from across the street with the promise of a free drink later. They looked bored, like this was just another Tuesday chore between sweeping the floor and counting inventory. Canton had them stand in front of his desk. The whole thing felt surreal. Wrong lighting, wrong location, wrong everything. Caleb had married Sarah in a church back east with flowers and family and music. This was just tired people in a dusty office, rushing through vows like they were reading a supply list. "Do you," Caleb roared, "take this woman?" Canton squinted at the form. "Eliza Boone to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Caleb looked at Eliza. She was staring straight ahead, her face revealing nothing. Lila sleeping peacefully against her chest. This woman he barely knew. This stranger he was about to tie his life to. "I do," he said. "And do you, Eliza Boone, take this man, Caleb Rourke, to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Eliza's pause stretched just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Then, "I do." Rings. They exchanged the iron bands. Caleb's fingers shook slightly. Eliza's were steady as stone. "By the power vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Kiss if you want. Sign here if you definitely want." They didn't kiss. Just signed their names on the marriage certificate while the shopkeeper and his wife scribbled their signatures as witnesses. The whole thing took maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes to completely alter the trajectory of 2 lives. Canton handed Caleb the certificate. "Congratulations. Try to make it last longer than the couple who owned those rings." Outside, the sun was brutal. Caleb stood on the courthouse steps, certificate in hand, trying to process what had just happened. Married. He was married. To a woman who was already walking toward the horses, adjusting Lila, ready to move on to the next task. "Eliza?" he called out. She turned back, waiting. We should probably talk about..." "About what?" "We did what needed doing. Now we go home and prepare for the fight." Her voice was matter of fact, like they'd just completed a business transaction. Which, Caleb supposed, they had. The ride back felt different. Heavier. The landscape was the same, the horses moved at the same pace, Lila slept the same as before. But something fundamental had shifted. They weren't 2 people hiding an arrangement anymore. They were married, legally bound. The town could call it improper or scandalous or whatever they wanted, but the law said otherwise. They made it back to the ranch as evening settled in, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple. Caleb unsaddled the horses while Eliza took Lila inside. When he came in, she'd already started preparing dinner, beans and salt pork, nothing fancy but functional. Should probably tell the town, Eliza said, stirring the pot. Before the hearing. Let them chew on it for a few days. How do you want to do it? Write in tomorrow. You go to the general store, mention it casual-like to Mrs. Henderson. She'll have it spread across town before you're halfway home. Caleb almost laughed. You've thought this through. One of us has to. Eliza dished out 2 plates, set them on the table. They ate in silence, the weight of what they'd done settling around them like dust. After dinner, Eliza retreated to her room still, despite everything. Caleb sat on the porch with his coffee, the marriage certificate folded in his pocket, feeling its presence like a brand. He'd loved Sarah, completely, purely, the way young people love before life teaches them better. She'd been light and hope and everything good about the world. Marrying her had felt inevitable, like falling into water on a hot day. This felt like falling into a well with no bottom. But when Lila cried from inside and he heard Eliza's footsteps, heard her soft voice soothing his daughter, he thought maybe that was okay. Maybe love wasn't the point anymore. Maybe survival was enough. The next morning, Caleb rode into Salvation Ridge with the certificate in his saddlebag and a speech prepared in his head. But when he walked into Henderson's general store, Mrs. Henderson took one look at him and her eyes went wide. Caleb Rourke, what have you done? Word traveled faster than he'd expected. By the time he'd bought his supplies, flour, coffee, ammunition, half the town seemed to know. He could feel the stares following him down the street, hear the whispers crackling like static. Marcus Steele caught up with him at the livery. Heard you took a trip to Millbrook yesterday. Caleb kept loading his saddlebags. News travels fast. Married her. Marcus said it like an accusation. You actually married that woman. I married my daughter's nurse, the woman keeping her alive. Nothing shameful about that. Marcus's face went red. You married a woman cursed by tragedy to make a mockery of this town's values. You think a piece of paper changes what this is? Caleb turned to face him fully. I think a piece of paper makes it legal, makes it proper, makes it none of your business anymore. The hearing's still happening, Marcus shot back. Judge Morrison will want to verify the marriage is legitimate, that it's not just some scheme to dodge scrutiny. Then he can verify it. We'll be there. Caleb swung up into his saddle. But Marcus, you might want to prepare your arguments better, because trying to take a child away from a married couple raising her together, that's going to look a lot worse than anything you accused us of before. He rode off before Marcus could respond, but he could feel the man's rage burning holes in his back all the way out of town. At the ranch, Eliza was waiting on the porch. How bad? About what we expected. Marcus is furious. Pritchard looked confused. Mrs. Henderson looked scandalized, but also grudgingly impressed. Caleb dismounted, started unloading supplies. They're still going through with the hearing. Of course they are. They've invested too much in destroying us to back down now. Eliza took Lila from the sling, the baby fussing and hungry. But we made them play a different game. That's something. The next 2 weeks crawled by like years. They prepared their case, such as it was, gathered evidence of Lila's health, her weight gain, her alertness, the way she responded to voices and faces, prepared arguments about their right to raise her, their capability, their legitimacy as a married couple. But underneath the preparation, something else was shifting. The awkwardness between them started wearing down through simple proximity and shared purpose. They still kept to separate rooms, still maintained the boundaries they'd established, but conversation came easier. Silences felt less heavy. Caleb learned that Eliza had taught school briefly before marrying Thomas, that she could read Latin and some Greek, picked up from books her father had left her, that she'd wanted children badly, and losing her son Samuel to fever had broken something in her that never healed right. Eliza learned that Caleb had been a soldier briefly, during one of the territory's endless skirmishes with raiders, that he'd built the ranch from nothing, working land his father had claimed but never developed, that he'd met Sarah at a church social and known within 5 minutes he'd marry her, though it took him 6 months to work up the courage to ask. They didn't talk about the future, just the past, and the present, and the hearing that loomed over everything. The night before they were due in town, Caleb found Eliza on the porch, staring out at the darkness. Lila was asleep inside, and for once neither of them had immediate tasks demanding attention. "Nervous?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "Terrified," she admitted. "Which is strange because I've already lost everything. You'd think I'd have nothing left to fear." "You haven't lost Lila." "No." Eliza's voice went soft. "Not yet. We won't. Whatever it takes, we won't." She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since they'd met, her walls dropped enough that he could see the person underneath, scared, exhausted, fierce, human. "I need you to understand something, Caleb. If this goes bad tomorrow, if they take her, I won't survive it." She said it simply, like stating a fact. "I can't lose another child. I won't come back from it this time." Caleb's throat tightened. "Then we make sure it doesn't go bad." "How? We're going in front of a judge who's known Marcus Steele for 20 years. In front of a town that's already decided we're guilty. How do we win that?" "We tell the truth." Caleb reached over, took her hand. She didn't pull away. "We tell them exactly what happened. How you saved Lila when everyone else turned their backs. How we built something that works, even if it doesn't fit their rules. How we're fighting for a child's life while they're fighting for their own comfort. The truth doesn't always win." "No," Caleb agreed, "but it's all we've got." They sat there in the darkness, hands linked, while the desert wind carried away their fear and doubt and replaced it with something harder, something that felt like resolve. Morning came too fast. They dressed carefully, Caleb in his wedding shirt, Eliza in the one good dress she owned, dark blue with buttons up to her throat. Lila wore a white gown Eliza had sewn from an old tablecloth, looking angelic and completely unaware of the battle being fought over her. The ride into town felt like riding toward execution, but when they crested the hill and saw Salvation Ridge spread out below them, Caleb felt Eliza straighten in her saddle, felt her gathering herself the way soldiers gather before a charge. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "thank you. For treating me like I mattered. For making me feel like—" She stopped, seemed to reconsider. "Just thank you. Eliza, don't. Not now. After, maybe. But not now." They rode the rest of the way in silence, two people heading into battle armed with nothing but truth and stubbornness and a baby who deserved better than the world was offering. The courthouse was packed. Half the town had turned out, drawn by scandal and righteousness in equal measure. Caleb saw faces he'd known for years, people who'd been friends once, all of them looking at him like he was something contaminated. Judge Morrison sat behind his bench, older than Caleb remembered, with white hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human foolishness the frontier could produce. Marcus Steele sat at the prosecutor's table with Sheriff Pritchard and two other men Caleb didn't recognize, lawyers, probably, brought in from bigger towns to make this official. Caleb and Eliza sat alone at their table. No lawyer, no support, just them and Lila, who was starting to fuss in Eliza's arms. Morrison banged his gavel. "We're here regarding the petition filed by Marcus Steele and others, requesting review of the custody arrangement for the minor child Lila Rourke." "Mr. Steele, present your case." Marcus stood, smoothing his expensive jacket. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of child welfare. Caleb Rourke, following the tragic death of his wife, entered into an improper arrangement with a woman of questionable character. For weeks, they lived together unmarried, violating every standard of decency our community upholds. Only when confronted with this hearing did they attempt to legitimize their situation through a hasty marriage in another town. We believe this demonstrates unfitness for parenthood and request the court remove the child to a proper home." "And you have a proper home in mind?" Morrison asked dryly. "Several families have expressed interest in providing the child with a stable, moral upbringing." Morrison looked at Caleb and Eliza. "You're married now?" "Yes, Your Honor." Caleb handed over the certificate. 8 days ago, legally performed in Millbrook." Morrison examined it, handed it back. "Seems legitimate, which rather undermines Mr. Steele's argument about impropriety, doesn't it?" "The timing reveals their intent," Marcus insisted. "This marriage is a sham, designed solely to avoid consequences." "That's a serious accusation," Morrison said. "Can you prove it?" Marcus hesitated. The circumstances speak for themselves. Circumstances aren't proof, Mr. Steele. You should know that. Morrison turned to Eliza. Mrs. Rourke, I assume you're taking his name. Eliza stood, still holding Lila. I am, Your Honor. Tell me about your arrangement with Mr. Rourke. How did it begin? Eliza's voice was steady, clear. His daughter was dying. The town refused to help. I was the only person willing to try. I succeeded. The arrangement became necessary because the alternative was letting a baby starve to death while people hid behind propriety. And the marriage? Was my suggestion. Eliza met Morrison's eyes directly. Mr. Rourke is a good man trying to raise his daughter alone. I'm a woman who lost her own child years ago. We found a solution that serves both our needs. Is it conventional? No. Is it genuine? Absolutely. Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying them. The courtroom was dead silent, everyone straining to hear. Mr. Steele, you claim this marriage is false, but I'm looking at a legal certificate performed by a legitimate judge with proper witnesses. What evidence do you have that it's anything other than what it appears to be? Marcus's face reddened. They maintain separate bedrooms. So do half the married couples in this territory after a certain age, Morrison interrupted. Next. The woman has a history. Her husband died. Her child died. Tragedy isn't evidence of wrongdoing, Mr. Steele. It's just tragedy. Your Honor, the town has standards. The town isn't on trial here. Morrison's voice hardened. A child's welfare is. And from where I'm sitting, that child looks healthy, well cared for, and thriving in her father's custody. Can you show me otherwise? Marcus sputtered, looked at Pritchard for support. The sheriff stood reluctantly. Your Honor, there's been talk in town about Mrs. Rourke's, about her character, about whether she's fit to... Talk isn't evidence either, Sheriff. Morrison banged his gavel. Here's what I see. A father fighting to keep his daughter alive. A woman willing to help when no one else would. A legal marriage, a healthy child. Mr. Steele, unless you have actual evidence of abuse or neglect, not gossip, not moral judgments, but evidence, I'm inclined to dismiss this petition. But, Your Honor, Marcus tried, do you have evidence? Silence. Morrison banged his gavel again. Petition dismissed. The child remains in her father's custody, along with his legal wife. This hearing is concluded. The courtroom erupted. Shouting, protests. Mrs. Henderson clutching her chest like she might faint. Marcus was on his feet, red-faced and furious, demanding reconsideration. But Morrison was already gathering his papers, done with the whole mess. Caleb sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. They'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd won. Eliza was shaking beside him, still holding Lila, tears streaming down her face that she made no effort to hide. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. But come on, Caleb said, taking her arm. Let's get out of here before they change their minds. They pushed through the angry crowd, ignoring the curses and accusations, making for the door. Outside, the sun was brutal, but it felt like freedom, like walking out of prison into clean air. They were halfway to their horses when Marcus caught up with them, his face twisted with rage. This isn't over, Rourke. That marriage is a fraud, and everyone knows it. I'll find a way to prove it. Caleb turned, and something in his expression made Marcus take a step back. You do that, Marcus. You spend all your time and money trying to destroy us. Meanwhile, we'll be at the ranch, raising my daughter, living our lives, and every day you waste on this vendetta is a day you're not living yours. He didn't wait for a response, just helped Eliza onto her horse, mounted his own, and rode out of Salvation Ridge with his wife and daughter, leaving the judgment and hatred and small-minded cruelty behind. They were a mile out when Eliza started laughing. Not polite laughter, but great gasping peals of it, like something had broken loose inside her. We won, she kept saying between laughs. We actually won. Caleb found himself laughing too, the relief and absurdity of it all bubbling up. Lila, startled by the noise, started crying, which made them laugh harder. By the time they reached the ranch, the laughter had faded into exhausted silence. Caleb helped Eliza down, took Lila while she stretched her back. They stood in the yard, the three of them, as the evening light turned everything gold. What now? Eliza asked quietly. Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd saved his daughter, fought beside him, married him in a dusty office without flowers or family or any of the things marriages were supposed to have. This stranger who was becoming less strange by the day. "Now," he said, "we figure out how to be a family." Eliza stood in the doorway watching Caleb carry Lila inside, and the word family echoed in her head like something foreign. She'd had a family once, lost it piece by piece, until there was nothing left but empty rooms and memories that cut like broken glass. The idea of building another one felt like tempting fate. But Lila was crying now, properly worked up from the long day, and Eliza's body responded before her mind could catch up. She moved inside, took the baby from Caleb's arms without a word, settled into the rocking chair that had become hers over the past weeks. "I'll start dinner," Caleb said, heading toward the kitchen. "There's salt pork in the cold box. Potatoes need peeling." They'd fallen into rhythms without discussing them, dividing labor in ways that made sense. Eliza handled Lila, managed the house. Caleb worked the ranch, brought in supplies. Separate spheres that occasionally overlapped, like circles in a drawing that shared just enough space to function. But family meant more overlap. Family meant what? Eliza wasn't sure anymore. Her marriage to Thomas had been simple, traditional. He worked, she kept house, they made a child. Then everything fell apart. This thing with Caleb didn't fit any pattern she recognized. Lila finished nursing and fell asleep against Eliza's shoulder, her tiny hand curled in Eliza's hair. The baby had grown so much in 2 months. From that gray dying thing Caleb had brought to her door to this solid, pink-cheeked, alive. Looking at her sometimes made Eliza's chest hurt in ways she couldn't name. "Food's ready?" Caleb called from the kitchen. Eliza laid Lila in the cradle carefully, covering her with the blanket Sarah had made. That was another thing they didn't talk about. Sarah's ghost, everywhere in this house. Her curtains, her dishes, her furniture. The good wife, the proper wife, the one who died doing everything right. At the table, Caleb had set out 2 plates. The portions were equal, generous. He treated her like a partner, not a servant. Another thing that didn't fit the patterns she knew. "Thank you," she said, sitting down. "For today, for—" She gestured vaguely. "All of it. You're the one who came up with the solution." Caleb poured coffee for both of them. "I was ready to just fight them straight on. Probably would have lost." "You would have lost," Eliza agreed. "Marcus Steele doesn't start fights he can't win. He was counting on us being too scared or too proud to do what we did. Marrying a stranger. We're not strangers anymore." The words came out before Eliza could stop them, and she felt heat rise in her face. "I mean, we've been living together for weeks. Stranger isn't the right word." Caleb studied her across the table. "What's the right word?" "I don't know." Eliza focused on her food. "Partners, maybe. People who need each other." "That's more than one word." "Then I don't have the right word." She met his eyes. "Does it matter?" He was quiet for a moment. "Guess not, as long as we both understand what this is." But the problem was, Eliza was starting to lose track of what this was. It had started as pure survival, save the baby, hide from the town, stay alive. Then it became tactical, get married, win the hearing, protect what they'd built. But somewhere in the middle of all that strategy and necessity, something else had started growing, something she didn't have words for and wasn't sure she wanted to name. After dinner, Caleb went out to check on the cattle while Eliza cleaned up. Through the window, she could see him moving through the evening light, tall and steady, the kind of man who knew how to work until a job was done. Thomas had been like that too, but softer somehow. Less certain. Caleb moved like someone who'd made peace with hard choices. When he came back inside, Lila was fussing again. Eliza was walking her, patting her back, trying to ease whatever discomfort was making her squirm. "She's sick?" Caleb asked, worry immediate in his voice. "No, just gassy. Happens sometimes." Eliza kept walking, kept patting. "She'll settle." "Here, let me try." Caleb reached for Lila, and Eliza handed her over. He held the baby against his shoulder, his large hand covering most of her tiny back, and started pacing the room. His movements were awkward, unpracticed, but determined. Eliza watched him work at fatherhood the way he worked at everything, with complete commitment despite not entirely knowing what he was doing. After a few minutes, Lila burped loudly and immediately relaxed. "There we go," Caleb said, relief evident. "That better?" Lila made a contented sound and grabbed at his collar. She likes you, Eliza observed. She tolerates me. You're the one she loves. She loves whoever feeds her. That's how babies work. Is it? Caleb looked down at his daughter, and something shifted in his expression. My mother died when I was young. Don't remember much about her except I remember feeling safe when she held me, like nothing bad could happen as long as she was there. And then she died, and bad things happened anyway. Yeah. He met Eliza's eyes. But I still remember that feeling. Want Lila to have that. Want her to feel safe. She does, Eliza said quietly. You can see it in how she sleeps, how she doesn't startle at every noise anymore. She knows she's protected. They stood there in the lamplight, the baby between them, and Eliza felt that dangerous something growing stronger. The thing that made her care about more than just survival. The thing that made her imagine futures beyond the next meal, the next fight, the next disaster. I should sleep, she said abruptly, needing distance. Lila will be up twice before morning. Right, yeah. Caleb handed the baby back, their hands brushing in the exchange. Sleep well. Eliza retreated to her room and closed the door firmly. But sleep didn't come easy. She lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the house, Caleb moving around his room, Lila making small noises in her cradle, the wind rattling the shutters. The sounds of a household. The sounds of something that could almost be called home if she let herself believe in such things. The weeks after the hearing brought an uneasy peace. The town didn't forgive them. Salvation Ridge wasn't the forgiving type. But they stopped actively attacking. Marcus Steele glared whenever Caleb came in for supplies, and the women in the general store whispered loud enough to be heard, but nobody filed more petitions or made more threats. Caleb started going to town twice a week instead of once, needing supplies for repairs he'd been putting off. The ranch had suffered during Sarah's sickness and Lila's crisis, and now he was playing catch-up. Fences needed mending. The barn roof needed patching. Irrigation ditches required clearing. Eliza watched him work himself ragged and finally confronted him about it one evening. You're going to break yourself doing all this alone. Caleb looked up from the harness he was repairing. Needs doing. So hire help. You have money for it. Can't afford to pay what help costs right now. Need to save for winter supplies, for... He stopped, reconsidered. For emergencies. For when they come after Lila again. They won't. Judge Morrison ruled on that petition. Doesn't mean they won't find another way. Eliza sat down across from him. But running yourself into the ground won't stop them. It'll just make you weaker when the next fight comes. Caleb set down the harness. What do you suggest? Let me help. I can manage more than just the baby and the house. Eliza, you're already... What? Already doing enough? I'm nursing a baby and keeping a house clean. That's maybe 6 hours of actual work a day. The rest is just waiting for Lila to wake up. She leaned forward. I grew up on a ranch, Caleb. I know how to mend fence, how to work cattle. My father made sure of it before he died. I didn't know that. You don't know a lot of things about me. She said it without accusation, just fact. We got married without really knowing each other. Maybe it's time we fix that. Caleb studied her. Okay. Tomorrow, you come help with the north fence line. We'll see how you handle it. I'll handle it fine. She did better than fine. The next morning, she bundled Lila into a sling, packed supplies, and followed Caleb out to the damaged fence. While he pulled up old posts, she dug new holes, moving with the kind of efficiency that came from muscle memory. Your father taught you well, Caleb observed, watching her work. He wanted a son, got me instead. Figured he'd make the best of it. Eliza wiped sweat from her forehead. Taught me everything he would have taught a boy. Roping, riding, shooting. My mother hated it, said it would make me unmarriageable. Maybe she was right. Thomas married you. Thomas married me because I was pregnant and he was decent enough to do the right thing. The words came out harder than she'd intended. We made it work, but it wasn't love at first sight or any of that nonsense. Caleb hammered in a new post. Sarah and I weren't love at first sight either. People like to romanticize things, but mostly marriage is just showing up, day after day, doing the work. Is that what we're doing? The work? I think so. He moved to the next post. Doesn't look like any marriage I've seen before, but maybe that's not a bad thing. They worked in silence after that, falling into a rhythm. Dig, set, hammer, move. Lila slept through most of it, occasionally waking to fuss before settling again. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace, but they kept working. Around noon, they stopped for water and food. Eliza had packed bread and cheese, and they ate in the shade of a scraggly cottonwood tree. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said after a while. "Depends on the question." "Your son, Samuel. You don't talk about him much." Eliza's hand stilled on her bread. "Not much to say. He got sick, he died. Happens all the time out here." "How old was he?" 3. She forced herself to keep eating, keep moving, keep functioning. Old enough to have a personality, to be a person, not just a baby. Old enough that losing him felt like losing a future, not just a present. "I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "I don't mean I know you understand. You lost Sarah. It's not the same as losing a child, but grief is grief." "Is it easier?" Caleb asked. "Loving Lila after losing Samuel?" Eliza looked down at the baby sleeping against her chest. "It's terrifying. Every time she cries, I think she's dying. Every time she gets too quiet, I panic. I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the universe to take her too." "But you love her anyway." "I don't have a choice," Eliza's voice cracked. "She needed me, and I couldn't watch another baby die. Even if loving her destroys me later, I couldn't walk away." Caleb reached across the space between them and took her hand. Just held it, not saying anything, letting the gesture speak for itself. They sat like that for a while, two people who'd lost too much holding on to each other in the wreckage. Then Lila woke up hungry, and the moment broke, and they went back to being partners working a fence line. But something had shifted. Some wall had come down. When they worked together now, it felt less like strangers cooperating and more like what Caleb had said. Marriage. The showing up kind. The doing the work kind. Over the following weeks, they settled into new patterns. Eliza helped with ranch work when Lila's schedule allowed. Caleb started taking on more of the household tasks, cooking dinner while Eliza fed the baby, cleaning up while she put Lila to bed. They moved around each other with increasing ease, learning each other's rhythms and habits. And they talked. Real conversations, not just functional exchanges. Eliza told him about her childhood, about her father's ranch, and her mother's disappointment, and the book she'd read that convinced her there was more to life than cattle and dust. Caleb told her about his time as a soldier, about the things he'd seen that made him want to build something instead of destroy, about meeting Sarah and feeling like he'd found someone who could help him forget the violence. "Do you still think about it?" Eliza asked one evening. They were on the porch, watching the sunset, Lila asleep inside. "The fighting?" "Sometimes, dreams mostly. Not as much as I used to." Caleb sipped his coffee. "Having something to protect helps. Gives the violence a purpose instead of just being..." He gestured vaguely. "Noise and blood and nothing mattering." "Everything here matters," Eliza said. "Every fence post, every meal, every time Lila wakes up crying, it all matters." "Yeah." He looked at her. "It does." 3 months after the hearing, winter started creeping in. The days stayed hot, but the nights turned cold, and morning frost appeared on the windows. Caleb began preparing the ranch for the lean months, storing hay, reinforcing the barn, checking the chimney for blockages. Eliza threw herself into preserving food. She'd brought in a small garden over the summer, vegetables and herbs planted in the space behind the house where Sarah's garden had died from neglect. Now she spent days canning and pickling, filling shelves with jars that would keep them fed when fresh food became scarce. Lila was crawling now, getting into everything, requiring constant attention. But she was also laughing, reaching for them, responding to her name, becoming a person instead of just a baby who needed keeping alive. "She has Sarah's eyes," Caleb said one evening, watching Lila play with wooden blocks he'd carved for her. "She has your stubborn chin," Eliza countered. "Poor thing never had a chance at being docile." "Is that a bad thing?" "Out here? Docile gets you killed." Eliza picked up Lila, who immediately tried to grab her nose. "Stubborn might actually save her." "Stubborn and loved," Caleb added. "That's a decent start." Eliza met his eyes over Lila's head, and something passed between them. An acknowledgement of what they'd built, what they were building. Not the marriage they'd planned, not that either of them had planned it at all, but something functional, something real. That night, after Lila was asleep, Eliza found herself standing outside Caleb's bedroom door. She'd been heading to her own room but stopped, hand raised to knock, heart pounding for reasons she didn't want to examine. The door opened before she could knock. "Eliza?" Caleb stood there in his work pants and undershirt, hair messy from running his hands through it. "Something wrong?" "No, I just—" She lowered her hand. "I wanted to say thank you for today, for making her feel like a partner, for treating her like she mattered, for building something with her that felt like it might last." "You don't have to thank me for basic decency," Caleb said. "You'd be surprised how rare basic decency is." Eliza stepped back. "Anyway, that's all. I should let you sleep." "Eliza, wait." He caught her arm gently. "I've been thinking about us, this arrangement we have." Her stomach dropped. "If you want me to leave—" "No, opposite of that." He let go of her arm but didn't step back. "I've been thinking we should probably make this more— we're married, on paper, legally, but we're still living like strangers," Eliza finished. "I know. Are we? Still strangers?" She looked at him, really looked at him. The man who'd fought for his daughter when everyone else gave up. The man who'd married her to save them both. The man who'd spent 3 months showing her what partnership could look like when it wasn't about ownership or obligation. "No," she said quietly. "We're not strangers anymore." "Then maybe we should stop pretending we are." Eliza's breath caught. "Caleb, I can't. If you're asking what I think you're asking, I'm asking if you want to try. Really try. Not just survive together, but—" He struggled for words. "Build something real. Something that's not just strategy and necessity." "I'm terrified of real," Eliza admitted. "Real things get taken away. Safe things, necessary things, those you can control. But real?" She shook her head. "Real is dangerous. Everything worth having is dangerous." Caleb reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle it made her chest ache. "I'm not asking you to love me, Eliza. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe we could be more than just partners raising a baby." "What if it doesn't work?" "What if it does?" Eliza closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand still lingering near her face. Everything in her screamed to run, to protect herself, to keep the walls up that had kept her safe since Samuel died. But another part, smaller, quieter, but growing stronger, wanted to try. Wanted to believe that maybe she could have this. Maybe she deserved this. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I." Caleb's voice was rough. "We figure it out together, same way we've figured out everything else." She opened her eyes and found him watching her with an expression that was part hope, part fear, completely honest. He was as scared as she was. That realization settled something in her chest. "Okay," she said. "We try." He pulled her into his arms then, and she went without hesitating, pressing her face against his chest and feeling his heartbeat through his shirt, strong and steady and alive. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, two people who'd survived too much alone, learning what it meant to stop being alone. When they pulled apart, Caleb kept his hands on her shoulders. "This doesn't have to change anything tonight. We can take it slow." "I don't know how to take things slow." Eliza managed a weak laugh. "We got married after knowing each other 6 weeks." "Fair point." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "How about we start with, I don't know, having breakfast together, talking more, figuring out if we actually like each other beyond just respecting each other?" "I already like you," Eliza said before she could stop herself. "That's the problem. If I didn't like you, this would be easier." "Liking me is a problem? When I'm trying not to care too much about anything because caring gets you destroyed?" "Yes." "Huge problem." Caleb cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Maybe it's time to stop trying not to care. Maybe caring is the whole point." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like he was afraid she'd break or run, or both. Eliza froze for a heartbeat, then kissed him back, pouring 3 months of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into it. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "So," Caleb said, "breakfast tomorrow?" Eliza laughed, the sound surprising her. "Breakfast tomorrow. And maybe you could show me those books you said Sarah liked? The ones about—" She'd forgotten what they were about. Her brain wasn't working properly. "The ones about the Oregon Trail?" Caleb's smile widened. "You really want to read about people dying of dysentery? I want to read what made Sarah happy. Want to know more about the life that was here before me." Caleb's expression softened. "She would have liked you, Sarah. She would have seen past all the walls to who you actually are." "How do you know who I actually am?" "I'm not sure I know anymore." "You're the woman who saved my daughter when everyone else walked away. You're the woman who fights when fighting matters and strategizes when strategy works better. You're—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "You're someone who's been hurt badly but keeps trying anyway. That's who you are." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. "I should go to bed before I say something embarrassing." "Like what?" Like, I'm glad I met you, even though it was awful circumstances, even though we're both disasters. I'm glad." "I'm glad too," Caleb said quietly. Eliza kissed him once more, quick and hard, then retreated to her room before she could do anything else stupid like admit she was falling for him. That scared her more than anything the town could throw at them. But lying in bed, listening to the house settle around her, Eliza felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dangerous, reckless hope that maybe this time things could work out. Maybe this time she could have something good without it being ripped away. Down the hall, she heard Caleb moving around his room, heard Lila make a small sound in her sleep. The sounds of a family. Maybe they could do this. Maybe figuring out how to be a family was just like figuring out everything else. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one risk at a time. Outside, the desert wind howled, but inside, the house was warm. Safe. And for the first time since Samuel died, Eliza let herself believe that safe might not be temporary, that the thing she was building with Caleb and Lila might actually last. She fell asleep with that thought, and for once, her dreams weren't full of funerals and empty cradles. They were full of morning light and coffee, and a man who looked at her like she mattered. Morning came with Lila's crying, same as always. But when Eliza opened her eyes, something felt different. Lighter, maybe, or heavier. She couldn't decide which. She pulled on her robe and went to get the baby, finding Caleb already in the main room with Lila in his arms, trying to soothe her with absolutely no success. "She's hungry," Eliza said, taking her. "You can't logic a hungry baby into patience." "I was trying." Caleb looked rumpled and tired and slightly defeated. "Figured I'd let you sleep another 10 minutes. That's—" Eliza stopped, caught off guard by the small kindness. "Thank you." They looked at each other across the dim room, and last night hung between them like unfinished business. Eliza wasn't sure what she was supposed to say. Good morning felt too casual. About last night felt too formal. So she just settled into the rocking chair and focused on Lila, letting the familiar routine steady her. Caleb disappeared into the kitchen. By the time Lila finished eating, coffee was brewing and Caleb was cracking eggs into a pan. Eliza laid the baby in her cradle and joined him, still not sure what to say. "Sleep okay?" Caleb asked, keeping his eyes on the eggs. "Well enough. You?" "Barely." He glanced at her, something vulnerable in his expression. Kept worrying I'd pushed too hard last night, that you'd wake up regretting it. "I don't regret it." The words came easier than she'd expected. "I'm scared of it, but that's different." "Yeah." He flipped the eggs with more force than necessary. "That's different." They ate breakfast in careful silence, both of them navigating new territory without a map. When Caleb reached for the coffee pot at the same time Eliza did, their hands touched, and they both jerked back like they'd been burned. "This is ridiculous," Eliza said. "We've been living together for months. We're married. Why does everything feel different now?" "Because it is different." Caleb set down his fork. "Before, we had rules, boundaries. Now I don't know what we're doing, but the rules don't fit anymore." So we make new rules. What kind of rules? Eliza considered. How about we stop tiptoeing around each other like we're strangers? We already decided we're not strangers. So we act like it. Act like what? Like people who care about each other. Like, she took a breath. Like a married couple. A real one. Caleb's face did something complicated. You mean, I mean, we share a room. We share a bed. We stop pretending this is just a business arrangement. Eliza's heart was hammering, but she kept going. We're already doing everything else together. Raising Lila, running the ranch, fighting the town. Why keep pretending that we don't? She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't have words for what they were becoming. Caleb stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her to her feet. You're sure? Because once we cross that line, we already crossed the line. Last night, 3 months ago. The day I agreed to come here. Eliza put her hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. I'm tired of pretending I don't want this. Tired of protecting myself from something good, just because I'm afraid of losing it. He kissed her then, harder than last night, less careful. Like he was done being careful too. Eliza kissed him back, letting herself feel everything she'd been pushing down for months, want and need, and the desperate hope that this time things might work out. They broke apart when Lila started fussing again, both of them breathing hard. Tonight, Caleb said. Tonight, Eliza agreed. The day felt endless. Every task took twice as long because Eliza kept losing focus, her mind jumping ahead to evening. Caleb was worse. He tried to fix the same section of fence 3 times before Eliza told him to stop before he hurt himself. I feel like a kid again, he admitted, all jittery and stupid. You're not stupid. Eliza handed him the correct tool. Just distracted. You're not distracted? I'm terrified. That's different than distracted. Why terrified? Eliza sat down on the fence post they'd just repaired. Because the last time I let myself care about someone completely, he died. Then I had Samuel, and he died. I'm starting to think I'm cursed. You're not cursed. You're just human. Humans lose people. It's what we do. Caleb sat beside her. But we also find people. Build things with them. Sometimes those things last. And when they don't, then at least we tried. He took her hand. I'd rather try with you and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been braver. Eliza leaned her head on his shoulder. When did you get so wise? About 5 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last. They worked until sunset, then headed back to the house. Lila needed feeding, dinner needed cooking, animals needed tending. The ordinary tasks of living that kept going no matter what emotional upheaval was happening underneath. After dinner, Caleb gave Lila a bath in the kitchen sink while Eliza cleaned up. The baby splashed and laughed, completely unaware of the tension crackling between the adults. When she was clean and fed and sleepy, Caleb carried her to the cradle. Think we should move her, he said quietly. To her own room. Give us some privacy. She's still so small. She'll be fine. We're right down the hall. He looked at Eliza. Unless you've changed your mind. I haven't. Eliza's voice came out steadier than she felt. Move her. I'll get her settled. 20 minutes later, Lila was asleep in the spare room they'd converted into a nursery. Eliza stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, delaying the inevitable. She's fine, Caleb said softly behind her. We'll hear her if she wakes up. Eliza turned to face him. They were alone in the hallway, and suddenly everything felt too real, too fast, too much. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. It's been 5 years since Thomas. I don't remember. Hey, Caleb stepped closer. We don't have to do anything. We can just sleep. Just be in the same room, whatever you're comfortable with. I want to. Eliza forced herself to meet his eyes. I'm just scared I'll do it wrong. That you'll compare me to Sarah and find me lacking. Understanding crossed Caleb's face. I loved Sarah. I won't pretend I didn't, but this isn't. You're not a replacement for her, Eliza. You're something completely different. Better or worse? Different, he repeated firmly. Sarah was easy to love, sweet and gentle and uncomplicated. He searched for words. Your fire and sharp edges and strength I didn't know women could have. You saved my daughter's life. You fought a whole town for us. You're the least lacking person I've ever met." Eliza felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "I'm a mess." "So am I." He cupped her face in his hands. "We're both messes, but we're messes together. That's got to count for something." She kissed him to shut him up, to stop the words that were breaking down the last of her defenses. He responded immediately, deepening the kiss, backing her toward his bedroom, their bedroom now, without breaking contact. They made it through the door before Eliza pulled back, gasping. "Wait, just give me a second." Caleb stopped immediately, his hands gentle on her waist. "Take all the time you need." Eliza looked around the room. Sarah's room. The curtains Sarah had sewn, the quilt Sarah had made, the mirror Sarah had hung, ghosts everywhere. "I can't do this in here," she said. "Not yet. It feels wrong," Caleb finished. "You're right. This was—" He looked around like seeing it for the first time. "We should have changed it months ago." "Your room or mine?" "Neither." Caleb's jaw set. "Help me move furniture." They spent the next hour rearranging his bedroom, their bedroom, took down Sarah's curtains, folded up her quilt, moved the furniture around until it didn't look like Sarah's space anymore. It wasn't perfect. Nothing could erase 3 years of marriage that fast. But it felt different, like a room that could belong to both of them. "Better?" Caleb asked when they finished. "Better." Eliza sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. "I'm sorry. I know this is—" "Don't apologize." He sat beside her. "You're right to want your own space, our own space. Sarah's gone. This is our life now." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Eliza took his hand and pulled him down beside her. What happened next was awkward and fumbling, and nothing like the romantic fantasies people told themselves. But it was real. Two broken people trying to build something new from the wreckage of their pasts. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the dark, Eliza felt something settle in her chest that might have been peace. "You okay?" Caleb asked, his voice rough. "Yeah." Eliza pressed her face against his shoulder. "Better than okay." "Good." He tightened his arms around her. "Because I don't want you regretting this in the morning." "I won't regret it." She lifted her head to look at him. "I might panic, might overthink it, might convince myself this is all going to fall apart, but I won't regret it." "Fair enough." He kissed her forehead. "I'll try not to make you panic too much." "Appreciated." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time since moving to the ranch, Eliza didn't sleep in her own room, didn't keep that final wall between them. Lila woke them twice before dawn, and each time they took turns getting her, a new routine forming without discussion. By the time morning properly arrived, Eliza felt like she'd been awake for days. But Caleb brought her coffee in bed, and that felt like a small miracle. "Could get used to this," she said, accepting the cup. "Don't. Can't promise to be this thoughtful every morning." He climbed back into bed beside her. "But maybe sometimes. Sometimes works." They drank coffee in bed while Lila played in her crib down the hall, babbling to herself. Domestic, normal, the kind of morning Eliza had stopped letting herself imagine after Samuel died. "What do we tell people?" she asked. "In town, I mean. When they notice, whatever they'll notice?" "Nothing. It's not their business." Caleb set down his cup. "We're married. We live together. What we do in our own house is our affair. They'll still talk. Let them." He took her hand. "I'm done living my life worried about what Marcus Steele and his cronies think. They tried to take Lila, and they failed. Far as I'm concerned, they've lost any right to opinions about how we live." Eliza wished she could be that confident. But the town's judgment still weighed on her, even after the hearing. Years of being treated like she was contaminated didn't wash off easily. As if summoning trouble by thinking about it, that afternoon they heard horses approaching. Eliza looked out the window and felt her stomach drop. "It's Pritchard," she said, "and he's got 2 men with him." Caleb came to look, his jaw tightening. "Stay inside with Lila." "Like hell. They came to our home. I'm standing beside you." They met Pritchard on the porch, united front. The sheriff looked uncomfortable, which meant whatever he was here for, he didn't like it. Caleb, Mrs. Rourke. He tipped his hat. Sorry to bother you folks. Then don't, Caleb said flatly. Wish I didn't have to. But I've got a complaint filed. Says you've been stealing cattle from the Henderson ranch. Silence. Then Caleb laughed, sharp and disbelieving. You're joking. I'm not. Henderson says he's missing 6 head, claims he saw your brand on them when he did his count last week. That's impossible. I haven't bought new cattle in months, and I sure as hell haven't stolen any. I'm inclined to believe you, Pritchard said, but I've got to investigate. Need to come look at your herd, verify the brands. Eliza felt rage building. This is Marcus's doing. He lost in court, so now he's trying another way to destroy us. I don't know anything about that, ma'am. I just enforce the law. Convenient how the law keeps getting used against us, Caleb said. Fine. Look at the cattle. They're all branded with my mark, properly recorded. You won't find any Henderson stock. They spent 2 hours going through Caleb's small herd while Pritchard and his deputies inspected brands. Every single cow bore Caleb's mark, a simple CR in a circle, no Henderson brand anywhere. Satisfied? Caleb asked when they finished. Pritchard looked relieved. Yeah, I'll file a report clearing you. Henderson must have miscounted or he lied, Eliza cut in. Because Marcus paid him to, or promised him something, however it works when powerful men want to destroy people they don't like. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Rourke. Then investigate it. Or admit you only investigate when it helps the right people. Pritchard's face reddened. I do my job fair and square. Do you? Eliza stepped forward. Because from where I stand, you've spent 6 months harassing us on behalf of Marcus Steele and his friends. First trying to take our daughter, now accusing us of theft. What's next? Setting our house on fire and calling it suspicious? Eliza, Caleb said quietly. No. I'm done being polite. She turned back to Pritchard. You tell Marcus that he can send all the false accusations he wants. We're not going anywhere. And every time he tries to destroy us and fails, he looks weaker. He's already lost once in court. How many more times does he want to lose in public? Pritchard looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. He settled for tipping his hat stiffly. I'll file my report. You folks have a good day. They rode off, leaving Caleb and Eliza standing in the yard. That was dangerous, Caleb said once they were alone. I don't care. Eliza was shaking with rage. I'm tired of them treating us like we're nothing, like we don't have the right to exist without their permission. I know, but pushing Pritchard too hard, what's he going to do? Arrest me for being rude? She turned to face him. We can't keep being scared of them, Caleb. Fear is what they want. It's how they control people. And anger is how people make mistakes that cost them everything. Eliza knew he was right, but it didn't help. She went inside, needing distance, needing to not feel this helpless rage. Found Lila in her crib, awake and happy, reaching for the mobile Caleb had made. Looking at the baby settled something, reminded her what they were fighting for. Not pride or revenge or even justice, just the right to raise this child without interference, the right to build a life that was theirs. Caleb came in a few minutes later and found her holding Lila. I'm sorry, Eliza said before he could speak. You're right. I can't let them make me reckless. You weren't reckless. You were brave. He sat beside her. Someone needed to say those things to Pritchard. Might as well be you. Won't make things easier. No, but easier isn't always better. He touched Lila's tiny hand and she grabbed his finger. We need to be smart, though. Marcus isn't going to stop. This cattle thing was just testing our defenses. He'll try something else. So what do we do? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. We make allies. We've been isolated out here, just the 2 of us against the town. That worked for survival, but if we want to actually live, to thrive, we need people on our side. Who? Everyone in Salvation Ridge either hates us or is too scared of Marcus to help. Then we look beyond Salvation Ridge. Caleb's mind was clearly working. Other ranchers in the territory, people who don't answer to Marcus, we build relationships, trade agreements, mutual support. Make ourselves part of a bigger community that can't be easily destroyed. It made sense. Eliza had been so focused on protecting what they had that she hadn't thought about growing beyond it. "Where do we start?" she asked. "The Michaels Ranch, about 15 miles west. They're good people, been here longer than Salvation Ridge existed. They don't get involved in town politics." "And you think they'll help us?" "I think they'll at least listen. That's more than we've got from anyone else." 2 days later, they rode out to the Michaels Ranch with Lila bundled between them. The spread was bigger than Caleb's, a main house, several outbuildings, what looked like 30 head of cattle grazing in improved pastures. Thomas Michaels met them in the yard, a weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes. "Caleb Rourke, been a while." "Too long. This is my wife, Eliza, and our daughter, Lila." Michael's eyebrows went up slightly. Probably he'd heard the gossip, but his expression stayed neutral. "Pleasure. What brings you out this way?" "Wanted to talk. If you've got time." "Always got time for neighbors." Michaels gestured toward the house. "Come on in. Martha just made coffee." Inside, Martha Michaels was exactly what Eliza had expected. Solid, no nonsense, the kind of woman who'd raised 5 children on the frontier and hadn't let it break her. She took one look at Lila and her face softened. "May I?" she asked, reaching for the baby. Eliza handed her over carefully, watching for any sign of judgment or hostility. But Martha just cooed at Lila, making her smile, completely unself-conscious. "Beautiful child," Martha said. "Healthy, too. You're doing good work with her." Something in Eliza's chest unclenched. "Thank you." They sat around the kitchen table while Thomas poured coffee. Caleb explained the situation, the harassment, the false accusations, the sense that Marcus was building toward something bigger. "Been hearing things," Thomas said when Caleb finished. "About you two. About the hearing. About Marcus making noise around town." "What kind of noise?" Eliza asked. "The kind that says he's not done with you yet, that he's working on something that'll stick this time." Thomas met Caleb's eyes. "He's got pride invested now. Losing in court embarrassed him. Men like Marcus don't handle embarrassment well." "So what do we do?" "You do what you're doing right now. Build alliances, make friends. Stop being isolated targets." Martha spoke up, still holding Lila. "We'll help. Trading partnership, shared resources when needed, witnesses if there's another hearing. Whatever makes sense." "Why?" Eliza couldn't help asking. "You don't know us. Why take our side against Marcus?" Martha looked at her husband, some silent communication passing between them, then back at Eliza. "Because 30 years ago, we were you, young couple, new ranch, and the people in town didn't like how we did things. Different circumstances, but same pattern. Someone with power decided we didn't belong." She adjusted Lila in her arms. "We survived because other ranchers helped us. Figured it's time we returned the favor." Eliza felt tears threaten again. Seemed like everything made her cry lately. "Thank you." "Don't thank us yet. This isn't over, and it might get worse before it gets better." Thomas refilled their coffee. "But you're not alone. That counts for something." They spent 2 hours at the Michaels Ranch, talking strategy and building connections. By the time they left, they had agreements for trade, for mutual support during crises, for testimony if needed. Small things, but they added up to something bigger than just 2 people fighting alone. On the ride home, Caleb was quiet, thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" Eliza asked. "That we might actually make it. Not just survive, actually build something that lasts. Don't jinx it. I'm serious." He looked at her. 3 months ago, we were just trying to keep Lila alive. Now we're married, we're making allies, we're becoming something real." Eliza wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the future could be different than the past, but hope still felt dangerous. "One day at a time," she said. "That's all I can handle." "Fair enough." Caleb reached over and squeezed her hand. One day at a time, together. That night, after Lila was asleep and they were in bed, Eliza found herself thinking about what Martha had said, about being isolated targets, about how connection was protection. "Caleb?" she said into the darkness. "Yeah?" "I think I'm happy." She said it like a confession. I think this is what happiness feels like, and I'd almost forgotten." He pulled her closer. "Good. You deserve to be happy." "So do you." "Then we're both getting what we deserve." He kissed the top of her head. About time, don't you think? Eliza fell asleep feeling safer than she had in years. Not because the danger was gone. Marcus was still out there, still planning, still determined to destroy them. But because she wasn't alone anymore. Because she'd found people who fought beside her instead of leaving her to fight alone. The next morning brought new challenges. Fences that needed mending, cattle that needed moving, a baby who'd decided sleep was for other people. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. Winter came hard that year, arriving with frost that turned the desert into something brittle and unforgiving. Eliza woke one morning to find ice crystals on the inside of the windows, her breath visible in the bedroom air. Caleb had already gotten up, probably to start the fire and check on the animals. She found him in the kitchen, coffee brewing, looking out at the white landscape with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough. Lost 2 chickens overnight. Need to reinforce the coop, make sure the cattle have enough shelter." He turned to her. "Going to be a long winter?" Eliza poured herself coffee, standing close to the stove for warmth. "We've got enough supplies?" "For us, yeah. Animals might be tight if this cold keeps up." He rubbed his face. "Should have prepared better. We were busy fighting for our lives. Can't blame yourself for that." Lila started crying from the bedroom, her wail cutting through the morning quiet. Eliza went to get her, finding the baby red-faced and furious about the cold. She bundled her in extra blankets and brought her to the kitchen where it was warmer. "She's getting big," Caleb observed, watching Lila grab at Eliza's hair. "Almost 6 months now. Won't be long before she's walking, getting into everything." The thought made Eliza's chest tight. 6 months since that desperate morning when Caleb had shown up with a dying baby. 6 months since she'd made the choice that changed everything. Sometimes it felt like years. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. They settled into the winter routine, shorter days, longer nights, work compressed into the hours when the cold wasn't actively dangerous. Caleb spent mornings tending animals and reinforcing structures against the weather. Eliza managed the house, and Lila venturing out only when necessary. 2 weeks into the freeze, Thomas Michaels rode up with supplies. "Figured you might need these," he said, unloading sacks of grain and dried goods. "Weather's worse than usual. We're all sharing what we can." "We can pay," Caleb started. "Didn't ask you to. This is what neighbors do." Thomas handed over the last sack. "Besides, you'll return the favor when we need it. That's how this works." It was the first time in Eliza's adult life that help had come without strings attached. No judgment, no conditions, just help. The concept was almost foreign. "Martha wanted me to check on the baby," Thomas added. "Make sure she's handling the cold okay." Eliza brought Lila out, bundled like a tiny burrito. Thomas's weathered face softened when he saw her. "She's thriving. You're doing good work." He looked at Eliza directly. "Both of you. Don't let anyone tell you different." After Thomas left, Caleb stood in the yard holding the supplies, looking thoughtful. "What?" Eliza asked. "Just thinking how different this is than before. When Sarah was sick, when she died, people brought food, but it felt like obligation, like they were checking a box so they could say they'd done their duty." He shifted the grain sack. "This feels real, like Thomas actually cares whether we make it through winter. Maybe we finally found the right people. Maybe we finally became the right people." Caleb headed toward the barn. People worth caring about. The cold held for 3 more weeks, testing everything they'd built. But they made it through, together, with help from the Michaels and 2 other ranching families they'd connected with. The isolation that had nearly destroyed them was breaking down, replaced by something that almost looked like community. Then, just as the worst of the winter started easing, Marcus made his move. Eliza saw the riders first, 5 of them, coming fast from town. She recognized Marcus's expensive horse in the lead, Sheriff Pritchard beside him. The others she didn't know, but they had the look of hired men. Trouble on horseback. "Caleb," she called, already moving toward the house. He came running from the barn, saw the riders, and his jaw set hard. "Get Lila inside, lock the doors." "I'm not hiding. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to protect our daughter while I handle this." His eyes were fierce. "Please, Eliza." She grabbed Lila from where she'd been playing on a blanket and retreated inside, but she positioned herself by the window where she could see, could intervene if needed. Marcus dismounted first, flanked by his men. Pritchard looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Caleb Rourke," Marcus called out. "We need to talk." "Then talk. Privately, man to man. Anything you've got to say, you can say in front of witnesses." Caleb stayed on the porch, keeping the high ground. "I've learned that lesson." Marcus's face reddened. "Fine. Have it your way. I'm here to make you an offer. A generous one, considering how much trouble you've caused this town." "What offer?" "I'll buy your ranch. Fair price, cash money, enough for you to start over somewhere else. Somewhere people don't know your history." The words hung in the cold air like poison. "My ranch isn't for sale," Caleb said flatly. "Everything's for sale at the right price. I'm offering you a way out, Rourke. A way to stop fighting and just move on. Take that woman and the baby somewhere you can all start fresh. This is our fresh start. We're not going anywhere." Marcus's expression hardened. "Then you're a fool, because I'm offering you the easy way. There are harder ways to make you leave." "Is that a threat?" "It's a statement of fact. This town doesn't want you. Your neighbors in town don't want you. Every time you ride in for supplies, you bring shame on all of us." Marcus stepped closer. "Take the money. Disappear. It's better than the alternative." "And what's the alternative?" Caleb's voice went deadly quiet. "Use your imagination." Pritchard shifted uncomfortably. "Marcus, that's enough talk." Marcus turned to his men. "Show 'em what happens to people who don't know when they've lost." The men moved fast, spreading out toward the barn and outbuildings. Eliza saw one pull out a torch and felt her blood turn to ice. She burst out of the house, Lila in her arms. "You burn anything on this property, you'll answer for it in court." Marcus turned, his smile cruel. "Will we? Fires happen all the time in winter. Accidents. Tragic, but not criminal." "With 5 witnesses watching you order it?" Eliza moved to stand beside Caleb. "You really think you're above the law?" "I think I am the law in Salvation Ridge. Judge Morrison's jurisdiction only reaches so far." "Then it's good we're not in Salvation Ridge, what?" a new voice called out. Everyone turned to see Thomas Michaels riding up, Martha beside him. Behind them, 3 other families Eliza recognized from recent trade meetings. 8 people total, all armed, all looking ready for whatever came next. "This is private property, Thomas," Marcus said, but his confidence was cracking. "Not your concern." "See, that's where you're wrong. Caleb and Eliza are our trading partners, our friends. That makes their concerns our concerns." Thomas dismounted slowly. "And I'm concerned about you threatening to burn down a neighbor's property. That's not just illegal, it's something we won't tolerate in this territory." "You're making a mistake." "No, Marcus, you're making a mistake." Martha spoke up, her voice carrying authority. "You think you can bully people because you've got money and connections. But out here, beyond town limits, your influence means nothing. Out here, we look after each other." The hired men were looking nervous now, outnumbered and clearly not paid enough to fight ranchers on their own land. Marcus's face went through several shades of red. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is." Caleb stepped off the porch. "You've tried everything: legal challenges, false accusations, intimidation, now arson. And you failed every single time. Because we're not alone anymore. We've got people who stand with us. So here's my counteroffer. Leave my property, stop harassing my family, and maybe we don't file charges for attempted arson with 12 witnesses." Pritchard cleared his throat. "Marcus, I think we should go." "The sheriff agrees," Thomas added, "which means if you stay, you're not just fighting us. You're defying the law you claim to represent." Marcus looked around, saw he was beaten, and his face twisted with rage. "You're all fools. Protecting these people who don't belong." "They belong here because this is their land," Martha interrupted. "Same as it's our land. Same as it's anyone's land who works it and builds on it and fights to keep it. You don't get to decide who belongs, Marcus. None of us do." For a long moment, Marcus looked like he might push it anyway, might order his men forward despite the odds. But then Pritchard put a hand on his arm. "Let's go, Marcus. This isn't the fight you want." The hired men were already mounting up, clearly done with this job. Marcus had no choice but to follow, climbing onto his horse with as much dignity as he could salvage. "This isn't over," he said one more time. "Yes," Eliza said clearly. "It is. You just don't know it yet." They rode off, Marcus radiating fury, Pritchard looking relieved, the hired men just looking ready to be somewhere else. When the dust settled, Caleb turned to Thomas and the others. "Thank you. If you hadn't shown up, we were already coming. Martha had a feeling something was brewing." Thomas grinned. "Turns out she was right." "How'd you know?" Eliza asked. "One of the hired men is married to my niece. He sent word that Marcus was planning something. We figured we'd better be here." Martha shifted her rifle. "Besides, we weren't about to let him burn down your home. That's not how we do things." The other ranchers nodded agreement. Eliza felt something break open in her chest. Not pain this time, but something else. Something that might have been hope or gratitude or the recognition that they'd finally found their people. "Stay for dinner," she said impulsively. "It's the least we can do." "We'd be honored," Martha said. What followed was chaos. 12 people crowding into the house that had felt so empty when it was just Caleb alone. Then Caleb and Eliza circling each other like strangers. Now it was full of noise and laughter and babies crying and stories being told. Eliza cooked everything she had while the women helped and the men talked strategy on the porch. Lila got passed around like a treasure, each family's children taking turns making her laugh. Watching her surrounded by people who cared, who protected her without needing to be related to her, made Eliza's eyes burn with tears she refused to shed in public. "She's beautiful," one of the younger women said, bouncing Lila. "You're lucky." "I am," Eliza agreed, and meant it. For the first time since Samuel died, she felt genuinely lucky. Not because nothing bad had happened, everything bad had happened, but because she'd survived it and found something worth having on the other side. Dinner lasted hours. Everyone squeezed around the table and spilling into the living room. They talked about winter, about spring planting plans, about the challenges of ranching in territory that didn't want to be tamed. Normal things, community things. As people were getting ready to leave, Thomas pulled Caleb and Eliza aside. "Marcus won't give up completely. Men like him don't. But he's lost his power over you and he knows it." Thomas looked serious. "He'll make noise, spread rumors, maybe try one more legal challenge. But he can't actually hurt you anymore. Not with all of us watching." "We can't thank you enough," Caleb said. "Then don't try. Just do the same for someone else when they need it. That's how we build something that lasts out here." Thomas clapped Caleb on the shoulder. "You're part of something bigger now. Act like it." After everyone left, the house felt quiet but not empty. Caleb and Eliza cleaned up together while Lila dozed in her chair, exhausted from all the attention. "Today could have gone very differently," Eliza said, washing dishes. "Yeah." Caleb dried them, putting each one away carefully. "If we'd still been alone, but we weren't. That's the point." She looked at him. "We stopped being alone." He set down the towel and pulled her close, careful not to get her too wet from the dishwater. "When did you get so wise?" "About 5 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last." They stood there holding each other, and Eliza felt the last of her walls finally crumble. She'd spent 5 years protecting herself from caring, from hoping, from believing anything good could last. But standing in this kitchen with this man and this life they'd built, she was done protecting herself, done assuming disaster was inevitable. "I love you," she said into his shoulder. "I know that's not part of the agreement we made, but I do. I love you." Caleb went very still. Then he pulled back to look at her face, his own expression stunned. "You... what?" "I love you. I'm in love with you. Have been for a while probably, but I was too scared to admit it." The words tumbled out now that she'd started. "And I know we started this as survival, and I know Sarah was your real love, and I know I'm not—" He kissed her to shut her up, deep and thorough and absolutely certain. "Sarah was my first love," he said when they broke apart. "But you're... Eliza, you're everything. You saved my daughter. You fought beside me. You made this house a home again. You made me remember what it feels like to want to wake up in the morning." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you too. Have for months, just didn't know if I was allowed to say it." "Why wouldn't you be allowed?" "Because it felt like betraying Sarah's memory. Felt like admitting she was replaceable." He rested his forehead against hers. "Took me a while to understand that you're not replacing her. You're the second chapter. The one I didn't think I'd get to have." Eliza kissed him again, tasting salt and realizing she was crying. Happy tears this time, the kind she'd forgotten were possible. They got Lila to bed together, both of them standing over her crib watching her sleep. 6 months old now, healthy and strong, and completely unaware of the battles fought to keep her alive. She'd grow up knowing she was wanted, knowing she was worth fighting for. "Think she'll remember any of this?" Caleb asked quietly. "Probably not, but she'll know she's loved. That's what matters." They went to bed themselves, and what happened there was different than before. Less desperate, more certain. The kind of intimacy that came from really knowing someone, from building trust over months of shared struggle. Afterward, lying in the dark with Caleb's arm around her, Eliza felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Peace. Real, lasting peace. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked. "That I'm happy. Completely, genuinely happy. And it doesn't scare me anymore." "Good. Because I plan on making you happy for a very long time." "How long?" "Rest of our lives, if you'll let me." Eliza smiled into the darkness. "I'll let you." Spring came slowly, the cold reluctant to release its grip. But when it finally broke, the desert transformed. Flowers erupted from the hard earth, turning the landscape into something briefly beautiful. Caleb and Eliza worked together, preparing for planting season. Their partnership now so natural, they barely needed to communicate. Lila turned 1 year old on a warm April morning. They celebrated with the Michaels family and a few others, marking the milestone that once seemed impossible. Watching their daughter take her first wobbly steps, Eliza thought about that desperate morning a year ago when Caleb had shown up with a dying baby. Everything had changed. Everything. 2 weeks after Lila's birthday, Pritchard rode out alone. Eliza tensed when she saw him, but his face held no threat. "Just wanted to give you an update," he said, declining their offer to come inside. "Marcus Steele is leaving Salvation Ridge, selling his businesses, moving back east. Says the territory doesn't suit him anymore." Caleb and Eliza exchanged looks. "What changed his mind?" Caleb asked. "I think he finally realized he'd lost, that he'd spent 6 months fighting you and had nothing to show for it except looking like a fool." Pritchard shifted in his saddle. I think people in town started questioning him, started wondering why he was so obsessed with destroying you. That kind of attention, Marcus doesn't handle well." "So he's running away," Eliza said. "He's leaving, which is probably best for everyone." Pritchard looked uncomfortable. "I owe you folks an apology. I let Marcus use me to harass you, told myself I was just doing my job, but I was doing his dirty work. That's not the same thing." "No," Caleb agreed. "It's not. Anyway, he's gone, or will be soon. Figured you deserved to know." Pritchard started to turn his horse, then stopped. "For what it's worth, your daughter looks healthy. You look like you're doing okay. I'm glad." He rode off before they could respond. "Did he just apologize?" Eliza asked. "I think so, in his own way." Caleb put his arm around her waist. "It's over, really over." "Don't jinx it." "I'm not. I'm just—" He pulled her closer. "I'm acknowledging that we won. We survived, and we won, and we get to keep what we built." Eliza leaned into him, watching the dust from Pritchard's horse settle back into the earth. "What do we do now?" "Now? We live. We raise our daughter, we work the ranch, we have dinner with friends and fix fences and argue about whose turn it is to get up with Lila in the middle of the night." "Sounds boring. Sounds perfect." Summer arrived with brutal heat, and with it came new challenges: drought, sick cattle, a barn roof that finally gave up and needed complete replacement. But they faced each problem together, and none of it felt insurmountable anymore. The Michaels family became regular visitors, as did several other ranching families. Eliza found herself hosting dinners, organizing work parties, becoming part of a community in ways she'd never managed in Salvation Ridge. Out here, away from the town's judgment, she could be herself, could be valued for what she contributed rather than condemned for what she'd lost. Lila grew like a weed, walking and then running, babbling sounds that would eventually become words. She had Caleb's determination and Sarah's sweet nature and something entirely her own, a fierce independence that suggested she'd be a force to reckon with someday. One evening in late summer, Eliza stood on the porch watching Caleb play with Lila in the yard. Their daughter was chasing chickens while Caleb pretended to help, but mostly just laughed at her antics. The sight made something warm bloom in Eliza's chest. Martha Michaels rode up, alone this time, and joined Eliza on the porch.
"Looks like you've got yourself a family," Martha observed. "Took some work getting here." "The best things usually do." Martha accepted the water Eliza offered. "Heard from town that Marcus's house sold. New family moving in, apparently. Doctor and his wife. Town could use a doctor. Good for them. Also heard Mrs. Henderson asking about you at the general store. Wondering if you were well, if the baby was healthy. Might be she's feeling guilty about how things went down."
Eliza shrugged. "Not my problem. I don't need their guilt or their approval." "Good, because you won't get either, probably." Martha smiled. "But you've got something better. You've got people who chose you, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That's worth more than a whole town's approval." After Martha left, Eliza thought about that, about choice versus obligation, about building something real versus performing for an audience. Caleb came in later with a filthy, giggling Lila who needed a bath immediately. "She found a mud puddle," he said, looking sheepish. "I turned my back for 2 seconds. It's fine. She's supposed to get dirty. That's what being a kid is for." Eliza took their daughter, not caring that she was getting mud on her own dress. "I'll handle bath time. You start dinner." They moved around each other with practiced ease, the choreography of their lives now smooth and natural. After Lila was clean and fed and sleeping, they had dinner on the porch, watching the sun set over land that was theirs. "Been thinking," Caleb said, "about expanding the herd next spring, maybe even hiring some help if we can afford it." "We're planning long-term now?" "Yeah, I think we are." He looked at her. "Unless you've got other plans?" "No other plans, just—" Eliza reached for his hand. "Just this. This is enough." "Enough for what?" "For everything. For a whole life." Caleb squeezed her hand. "Then that's what we'll build. A whole life. Together." The years that followed weren't easy. Frontier life never was. They lost cattle to disease one summer, nearly lost the ranch to drought another year. Lila got sick when she was 3, scaring them both until the new doctor in Salvation Ridge helped her recover. Eliza had another miscarriage, a brief pregnancy that ended in grief before she'd even told Caleb about it. But through all of it, they had each other, had the community they'd built, had the certainty that whatever came, they'd face it together. Lila grew into a fierce, independent child who climbed trees and chased cattle and asked questions that had no easy answers. When she was 5, she asked Eliza about her mother, her real mother, Sarah. Eliza sat her down carefully. "Your mama Sarah loved you very much. She died bringing you into this world, but she wanted you to live. Wanted it so much that her last words were about keeping you safe."
"Are you my mama now?" "If you want me to be, I'm the one who feeds you and teaches you and tucks you in at night. That's what mothers do." Lila considered this seriously. "Can I have 2 mamas? One who's with the angels and one who's here?" Eliza felt her throat close up. "Yeah, baby. You can have 2 mamas. You can have as much love as the world wants to give you." "Good. Because I love you a lot. I love you too. So much." When Lila was 7, she started asking about school. The nearest schoolhouse was in Salvation Ridge, and the thought of sending her daughter into that town made Eliza's stomach turn. "We could teach her ourselves," she suggested to Caleb. "We could. But she needs other kids. Needs to learn how to be part of something bigger than just our ranch." He looked thoughtful. "Maybe it's time I stopped avoiding town. Time we both stopped letting them dictate where we're allowed to go." So they enrolled Lila in school, and it went better than expected. The town had changed in 7 years. New families, new attitudes. Marcus's poison slowly being replaced by something healthier. Some people still whispered when Eliza came to pick up Lila, but most just nodded politely and moved on with their lives. Mrs. Henderson even apologized one day, awkward and halting. "I should have helped. When your baby was dying, I should have helped, and I didn't, and I'm sorry." Eliza accepted the apology without making it easy. "Yeah, you should have. I was scared of what people would think, of what it would mean if I—" Mrs. Henderson stopped. "That's not an excuse, just an explanation. Fear makes cowards of all of us. Eliza said. But what we do after the fear passes, that's what matters. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. That was enough. The years continued.
Lila grew into a young woman who knew her own mind, who fought for what she believed in, who looked at the world with Sarah's kindness and Caleb's strength and Eliza's fierce determination. Watching her become herself was the greatest gift Eliza had ever received. Caleb's hair went gray at the temples, and Eliza found lines on her face that hadn't been there before. But they'd earned those marks, earned them through years of hard work and harder choices and the daily decision to keep showing up for each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised her with a new wedding ring. Not the iron band from Judge Canton's desk, but something he'd had made special, gold, with a small stone that caught the light. "Figured you deserved something better than borrowed metal," he said, slipping it onto her finger. Eliza looked at the ring, then at him. The iron one was fine. It represented what we are, strong, practical, built to last. "Yeah, but you deserve beautiful too. Deserve something that shows how much you mean to me." He pulled her close. 10 years, Eliza. 10 years since we stood in that office and had no idea what we were doing. We still don't know what we're doing. No, but now we're doing it together. That's different. They stood on their porch, rebuilt twice now, expanded once, looking out at land they'd fought to keep, worked to improve, learned to love. In the distance, Lila was riding with Thomas Michael's grandson, the two of them racing across the valley like the future belonged to them. Maybe it did. "No regrets?" Caleb asked quietly. Eliza thought about that morning 10 years ago when he'd shown up with a dying baby. Thought about every choice since, the marriage, the fights, the moments of doubt and fear and desperate hope. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Not a single one." "Good, because I'm planning on at least another 10 years of this." "Only 10? Fine, 20, 30, however long we get." Eliza kissed him, tasting coffee and dust and the life they'd built together. "However long we get, but I'm planning on it being a while. We're stubborn people. We don't quit easy." "No," Caleb agreed. "We don't." They went inside as the sun set, the house they'd made into a home waiting to wrap around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. Fences would need mending, crops would need tending. Lila would need guidance as she navigated the complicated world of growing up. But tonight, they had this. Had each other, had their daughter laughing in the next room, had the certainty that they'd survived everything the frontier threw at them and come out stronger. In the end, that was the story. Not about two perfect people finding easy love, but about two broken people choosing each other every single day. Choosing to fight when fighting mattered. Choosing to build when building was possible. Choosing each other over fear, over doubt, over the easier path of staying separate and safe. They'd started as strangers bound by necessity, became partners through survival, became family through choice. And that choice, renewed every morning, tested every day, strengthened through every challenge, that was what made it real. That was what made it last.